So today we're going to focus on the debriefing, but we're also going to cover a little bit more about trauma. Last week's trauma was very sparse. Okay. In a debriefing, there's an introductory phase where you're setting the groundwork, the foundation. There's a fact phase where we focus on the events. So we're going to find that we're helping the people to process what the tragic situation is in a very orderly manner in order to reduce the symptoms of the trauma and the effect. And it involves using that brain connection to both sides of your brain, right? So we're going to start with them focusing purely on the details and kind of separating that from reactions, emotions, and it helps them to process. So we introduce the trauma, the debriefing. We introduce ourselves, kind of tell them what it's going to be about, and then we get each member that we're talking with to focus on the facts as they remember them. So they're going into their memory and telling you facts. Now, sometimes the emotions come out, but and then we go into what they thought about it. Okay, so you're processing it, trying to be very cold, black and white, and then what did they think about it? And then their reactions. What did they do? How did they feel? And then we'll talk about the aftermath, or in the process, what kind of symptoms is there in trauma and in our crisis. So we've read some of that in the crisis and trauma book. There's other books available to study too. We're pretty well versed, I think, in understanding how these things affect us physically and mentally and emotionally. And then we talk to them about what is common. We let them know what they can expect and what is that they're not, as all the things that we talk to them about, right, when they're dealing with a situation, that these are common and normal responses or things that they're going to go through. So we inform them, and then we go into helping them move forward, talk about going beyond the few weeks of reaction to what they've experienced. Okay. So we find that trauma leads to silence. We pull back. We don't talk about it. It helps. We withdraw. We get isolated, and especially we know this is a tactic of the enemy. And I want to really emphasize that we as Christians need to respond from our training, but from our spirit. Yesterday, I was at the hospital, and there was a person walking down the hall and sort of looking like they were in some type of transition. You know, obviously there was something going on with their identity. And my daughter said to me later on, did you notice what that person's department was, what their function was? And I said, no. And she said it was spiritual care. So I do want to point out that in chaplaincy today, especially in institutions and the medical field, there's a lot of things going on that they're accepting and promoting that do not reflect the Christian standard of life, right? The God-fearing and healthy life that God intended all of us to live. So it's important for us, if we're thinking about that type of ministry, to know that you are going to be in a very dark place. And that's one of the reasons I really am hesitant to involve ICT too much in some of the certifications. And I got some information from this chaplaincy group called Innovation Lab. They're very, very inclusive. And there's more and more things going on in chaplaincy that do not conform to the Bible and the Christian morals and ethics and teachings. So when I was working on the chaplaincy website, I made sure to put in there that we found our outreach on the doctrines, the founding stones found in the Apostles or the Nicene Creed, so that it's very evident that what we are promoting comes from a Christian ethic. Okay, so going back to this, when we're in this crisis stage, we can be clamped down, we can get isolated, and that's where we can feel hopeless. And again, we always want to open that light at the end of the tunnel. So right here, I'm going to exit this and go into make this bigger. Let's put this bigger. Did this before. Trying to get this bigger, and I'm not doing it very well. All right, well, maybe I can't get it bigger because I can't reach the thing. There it goes. Okay, so this is our kind of introduction. This comes from, I don't remember, it'll say on the bottom, we're a Barnabas organization. Okay, so we're talking about helping us to understand crisis and trauma. So the key terms and concepts for crisis response. A crisis, there's a definition of a crisis, a temporary state of upset and disorganization characterized chiefly by an individual's inability to cope with a particular situation. Okay. The impact of any particular event, right here, point 2, or the second paragraph, varies from person to person. We cannot define a crisis based on external events alone, but rather as a combination of the event and the person's subjective reaction to it and their ability to cope. And we talked last week about our ability to cope is based on, we talked about being vulnerable, we talked about a precipitating event, we talked about, let me look back here so I can summarize it real quick. We talked about, here we go. We talked about adjusting, an adjustment phase, and the reconstructive phase. So adapting to the situation and then making the adjustments with our thoughts and actions in order to be able to respond and cope. So trauma, exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence in one or more of the following ways: directly experiencing the traumatic event, witnessing in person, learning that the traumatic event happened to a close family member or close friend, or experiencing repeated or extreme exposure to aversive details of a traumatic event. So the first ones we can see, oh yeah, I was in a car accident, or I saw a car accident, or this car accident and the following mayhem that ensued happened to somebody that was close to me. But we don't really realize, especially with the exposure to the internet and the media, how experiencing repeated or extreme exposure to aversive details of a traumatic event. So we have the example of 911, right? I know my mom said, we were out overseas at the time, but she said that in her environment, in her sphere, and just what she felt she lives in Florida, was that the people felt unsafe. Okay, so, well, I never thought that the United States would get attacked in such a way, right? And many people that did not. Go ahead, Madeline. Can you unmute? You raised your hand. I don't.
Okay, yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah. The 911 really upset my soul, and I agree with your mother. And it made it. I mean, even the following year, I cried. I cried. Matter of fact, I remember I had to leave work because I was still so traumatized by the fact that, and the way that all, the citizens of our country had died and everything. And even with COVID, because they kept showing it and giving us the numbers daily on the news, constantly inundating us with it, it's like murder shows. I can't watch them. I admit it, I can't watch them because it was so much, and with Ukraine and what's going on in Gaza, it's it's like they make it more vivid and vivid, the bloody, gory, and showing you that I can't watch a show that has, they're showing murder and killing, and I can't watch it. My psyche can't deal with it anymore.
Now, I've found also that as I become more sensitive to people's pain and the Spirit of God, that it grieves me and affects me very, very strongly. Different things like that, even like psychological shows, and seeing things about abuse, and like that. There was that trafficking movie that was out. I couldn't go to see that, because I knew that was going to affect me so strongly, to see people in that type of situation. And so, yeah, and we see that more. We see that with the Oxford shooting, and we see that the young people don't have the moral foundation to handle that, and they're bombarded with all these tragic events, and we're not made to carry all that information. What if there's a tsunami in Sri Lanka, or if there's a earthquake in South America? I mean, those type of things. We're previously we only were informed about what was in our 25, then 50 miles, then 100-mile radius. So we're not made to carry all that burden and that emotional stress. And so experiencing that produces a traumatic crisis response. So in a crisis response, we want to address their needs that arise from a crisis situation. It attends to the physical, emotional, and spiritual needs of those impacted by the crisis. And it can include assessment, psychological first aid, and crisis debriefing. So we want to be equipped to handle the social needs, right? I think there was a time when all we did was talk about spirit, but in James, it talks about if you see your brother in need and you just pray for him and say, be warmed by the fire. But there's physical aid that we can help with. We can help direct them to. I don't have unlimited resources to be able to put somebody up in a hotel until their burnt down house, they can get back into housing, right? But I can help direct them. We can sometimes, yes, we do give them financial aid. Sometimes we do welcome people into our home, or we bring them food, or babysit for them while they go look for a job, right? And we're very well aware of emotional needs. And we, again, just like Madeline often says, the church has left that to the world. And so all they do is psychologically help them, supposedly, right? And the church did focus on some of these things, and they abandoned the spiritual needs. Yeah, Edna says she can't watch those kind of shows either. And because we're aware of the reality, I think, right? So assessment is a skill that involves observing, asking questions, and bringing information together in order to understand how a person is functioning at that moment. Psychological first aid, supporting presence following the traumatic event, with goals of stabilizing, reducing distress, identifying basic needs, providing practical care, enhancing coping, and facilitating access to ongoing support. So that is the intervention type of thing we can do. It could be financial intervention, emotional crisis intervention, something following a flood, but it's the intervention type of thing that we do, right? Sometimes that's not part of our particular outreach, our effectiveness, but we can help direct people to the different things. But those are the goals of an immediate intervention when there is a crisis or traumatic events. And we talked about the different kinds that there can be. Okay, so then we're going to go. What we're going to do is we're going to go from this this PDF into the actual slides from TLC organization. A crisis debriefing is a structured way of helping a person. We talk about what happened. We talk about how it impacted them. We offer them information. We help strategize coping strategies with them. Now, that's not done right in the debriefing, but it is done in conjunction with that. And we make referrals to different resources that can supplement or take the first place in helping them. Okay, so I'm going to lower this one down here. So, all right. So this is from the note cards of a thing from TLC. All right, I'm going to read. I didn't copy this out, but this is an introduction statement that TLC teaches. And if you notice, I have a title and I have a little number. That is all on the same note card. So you have like index cards that when they're doing this, they have actual cards that flip over so that they keep it very dry. And this is the order that they are. So they're all written on, I think there's 12 cards. I'm not sure, but the number means that they're all on the same card. So I'm going to read this introduction to you. If you want it, I can include it in the PDFs. I probably will because it's part of the packet with their cards. So it said, we are chaplains and we have been called to do a debriefing with you to help you process what has happened. So that can, my side note, this can be through their organization or a family member or some kind of person reached out to us to organize this. And it's a voluntary thing, right? So nobody in a company, you're often forced to, or required to, we'll say it that way, to sit in on this. And you may or may not participate as you will. It is unfortunate that such a traumatic incident has brought us together. I'm sorry you have had to experience such a difficult thing. We will be giving you some information about trauma and the possible very normal reactions to it. We will also help you describe your experiences to one another. It may be difficult for some, but we think it will be helpful for you to see you probably share similar reactions. This is about your experience, not about how well you responded. There is no right or wrong answer or reaction. Everything said here will remain confidential, and we ask you to do the same and not share what others have said here. Agreed? We will start by asking about your relationship with the victim or what happened. Each of you will be able to respond as we go around. If you want to pass and have us come back to you after, that is fine. We will focus on the factual information and details before looking at personal reactions. We will summarize everything at the end and give you some resources and ways to help in the days and weeks to come. Listening to others can be helpful in the healing process. You may have a personal reaction to something that is said, but we ask to not interrupt other participants while they are talking. So my side note is sometimes somebody might burst out, "That's not the way it happened," or some other such thing. Your feelings are important, and we will talk about personal reactions later. Right now, we are focusing on factual information. This is not easy for anyone, including us, which is why we will use written questions to make sure we cover all the critical issues and give you the best help we can. We may take a few notes just so we can review them at the end to give a summary. Are you okay with that? So there is a team of persons, and they will switch off doing different functions, but somebody is going to be writing down some of the information so that when they review at the end, they can cover the different important aspects that came up. So we can stay focused. Please make sure your cell phones are turned off and put away. Did I type this in after all? No. It is unfortunate that such a traumatic incident has brought us together. I'm sorry you had to experience such a difficult thing. My name is Trish. My colleagues are Jane and John. You may provide a brief statement about your experiences with debriefing. Okay. So if you've had formal debriefings or informal talks with people. We have been asked to meet with you to give some information about trauma and all its possible reactions, which are very likely new to you, but very normal reactions following these kinds of situations. We are here to pass on to you what others have experienced following similar incidents. We are also here to help you describe your experiences to one another. Even though some of you may not want to be here right now, we think you'll find that this will help you with what you've experienced and help you see that you are probably sharing some similar reactions. So all these are still on the first note card. This is not about how well you responded. It is about looking at all the kinds of reactions you're experiencing and may yet experience in the weeks to come. There is no right or wrong reaction. This is not about blaming about what was done right or wrong. It is about learning what you need to know about trauma that can help you heal. So some of this is a repeat of the introduction. This session must be confidential. This means no one is here to talk to anyone about anything that is said here today. You may tell others of your reactions, but not what others talk about today. Do we all agree? We will start by asking about your relationship to the victim or to the event. Each of you will have an opportunity to respond as we go in the same order for each question. After spending time on the factual information and details, we will look at personal reactions. The last stage is the summary stage where we give you some information, ways to help yourself. We will also give you the opportunity to make some recommendations as to what might be helpful for you in your workplace. Afterwards, your principal or administrator will join us briefly to respond to your recommendations. So as I mentioned, often an organization will have a a formal debriefing. In looking into it, there was studies with chaplains doing debriefings of like cardiac arrest or codes in hospitals and how it affected the medical staff. So they do that, and we hear about it with the law enforcement, but they always act like we're too tough, so we don't want to do this, but they need to, right? Because otherwise your system gets overloaded. Okay, so we talked about factual and then the reactions. Listening to what one another has to say will be very helpful to healing and feeling better. We must ask that you not interrupt while one of the other participants is talking. Initially, you will have many personal reactions that will cause you to want to say something in response to what you hear. What you feel is important, and we will talk about personal reactions later in the meeting. However, until we get to that part, we want to be talking about factual information. So I want to pause here and emphasize that they're getting people to process this clinically without involving both sides of the brain. Okay. Card 3. You may notice that we have index cards. As you begin to tell your stories, you will be making us, in a way, witnesses. It is sometimes difficult for us to listen to the details of such tragic situations. It is not easy for anyone. These cards list the questions we want to ask so that you can make sure we cover all the critical issues and give you the best possible help. Any comments or questions at this point? Okay. Also, Jane will be taking some notes to help when we get to the point where we give a review and a summary of all we learned. There will be a lot said, and we want to be sure to capture as much as we can. If taking notes is a problem, just let us know, and we'll put the notepad away. When we are finished, we will rip up our notes. No records will be kept. Just one last issue. If you have beepers or phones, could you please turn them off or place them on the silent mode? Backup staff has been assigned to cover for you, so there is no reason for interruption during this meeting. Is everyone okay with that? And I believe you have been told that we will finish within 2 hours. The time varies with each situation, but we will not go beyond 2 hours. And I want to comment that when we've done the debriefing in the class, it's very tough to get it into the 2 hours. And we'd had, sometimes when you have a great big group of people, I can't see how they can answer all these questions and cover it. The Barnabas group said three hours. Okay, so let's begin. The questioning now begins. Let us begin with the factual information and details. Sorry, somebody. Did you state that you have to read all this? If so, you would have lost in the retaining of what you said. Generally, yes, Doreen, they do read, they do train to read this, and it's kind of normal to not capture all this, so they will, but it's a beginning, right? And yeah, a lot of people are likely to zone out, but it's a process that has been tested, so it seems to be kind of working. When we've done this with, I have a little sheet of like an informal questions to answer in a smaller, more intimate, shorter session with people. But yeah, this is actually done. Let us begin with the factual information and details. This is the first question. First, can you tell us who you are and what your relationship is to the victim? Allow each one to answer in order, then continue. So they would say, each person would say who they are, and I'm Joe Smith's mother. I'm his cousin. I'm a coworker. Or I was the truck driver at the accident. Okay. Question then, so after each person has answered or declined, where were you when this happened or when you first found out, and what did you do? So again, this is trying to get them to remember the details and process it without getting through the reactions. And we've experienced in things like funerals that they're talking more and more about the illness, the last days, what was happening, how they're feeling. And we know that they need to be able to be free to vocalize this in order to kind of diminish the effect and to process it and come to the reality of where we are today. I know a person who says, they have to say these things out loud to a person to get it, to process it and to, go through it in their mind. And they don't necessarily want an answer. They just need to be able to think it through by saying it out loud. So question number 2, where were you when this happened or when you first found out, and what did you do? So for example, in the example of 911, well, where were you? I was in Belgium, and I don't know why I had the TV on, but I had the TV on and I saw live coverage of, or I think it was live coverage of a plane crashing into the tower. It's like, what? Okay. So that's where I was, and that's what I did, right? What stands out most in your mind as to what you might have seen or heard when you arrived or when you first found out about it? So this part is not quite so verbal and doesn't have a lot of words. And so the person should be able to focus and not zone out. Okay. So what stands out most in your mind? What stood out was, what is this really happening, or is this a show? All right. That's what I thought. Factual information and details continued on card number 4. Are there details about what happened that you have heard since it happened, other than what others have told us here? So consequently to an event, you might hear other things from other people that were involved, suppositions or additional information. So they want to say, okay, so after that, what happened? So we found out that there was people that got onto this airplane and they somehow smuggled weaponry in, and voila. Was there anything that others have said that was supposed to happen, but did not happen? So sometimes people, because of what we see, we don't always see it accurately, or what we remember things differently. We can remember that this person had a red shirt and the other person said, no, they had a blue shirt. Okay, but did not happen. So what is the contradictions that you've heard? Again, factual information. Okay, let me shift the focus. What was the first thought you can recall having at the time it happened, or when you first found out? Okay, so the details that when you first found out, and what do you remember? What were your thoughts at the time? What did I feel about it? I can't remember. As you think about it, what one thought stands out the most in your mind? I couldn't possibly imagine that we were this vulnerable. Of all the thoughts you had, the things you did, or the reactions you experienced, which one thought or reaction are you most surprised you even had? For example, if there was a violent event and you wanted to attack the person that did this. Okay, what most surprised you about you? And again, Doreen mentioned that there was a lot of words and things. This is a formal debriefing, and as I mentioned, we probably will not be called on to do this at all, but knowing the stage and getting these questions, we can use them when we're dealing with somebody in a more compact and intimate setting. Our thought focus continued. Was there anything you thought you wished you would have done or said differently? Yeah, I wish I would have stopped and seen if anybody was okay at the accident site. I wish I hadn't spoken like that to my mother at the time. Is there anything you did that left you second guessing yourself or not quite sure you handled as effectively as you could have with some preparation? So there's different situations that you see, I did this, but if I had known, been prepared for encountering this, I might be able to help. For example, if I knew CPR, or you know, if I wish I had done this, I don't know why I'm disappointed in myself. Did I do the best I can? And sometimes there's a lot of regrets in our relationships and things we deal with. So it's like, I never had a chance to resolve this issue before someone died. I'm pulling this from other situations that we deal with, not crisis, but we find ourselves second guessing about what we could have done, how we could have avoided the incident. You know, if we got written up for something, it's like, oh, well, if I had thought about it, or if I had done this differently, or if I had thought, oh, well, you know, how could this work against me if it was recorded, for example? Sometimes I think about that when I'm watching my granddaughters, you know, so that, you know, in a daycare, you have cameras and different things about how you react. And it's like, oh, if I think about that somebody is watching me, I'm going to keep my cool a little bit better, right? If something similar were to happen again, how do you think you might react differently? So then that helps us prepare and think, well, we did this, but I could have bettered the situation by modifying what I said or did. Thank you. At this point, I'm going to let John continue. Any thoughts or questions? Okay, the personal reaction stage. So we went to the facts, we're doing our thoughts, and now we're getting to the emotions and the physical ways we responded. As I was typing this up the other day, I'm thinking I just was getting this kind of knot, this anxious feeling in my stomach, right? So they're going to be focusing on, well, when this happened, how did you feel? Were you shaking? Were you know, when you react to something, like you get a phone call and you're wondering, now what? So we are going to look at personal reactions now. Let me ask, what was the worst moment for you? I'm just going to let that sink in. Where did you feel the hurt or the fear most in your body? Okay, so you have emotions, your physical reactions. When we are in a heightened state in an emergency, our body responds with chemicals and our heart rate pounds, and you know, our body prepares us, and it takes away the blood flow from certain parts of our body to others to ensure that we function. And that's a God thing, right? We can see that those kind of reactions that God built into us, the preservative reactions that he gave us in order to help us cope with life and emergencies. What scared you the most then? So all the people, each person would say, what was the worst moment for you? I can't remember, decline. Where did you feel the hurt most in your body? Next person. Da, 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 da. What scared you the most? All the way around in order. What scares you the most now? I might lose my job, that somebody's going to come over and fly over and bomb where I live, whatever. And they're not ridiculous, because these are fears, and these are not they're automatic responses. It's not like, well, I respond when I'm practicing shooting a basket, dun, 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 and then I throw. Those are practice reactions. These are automatic and they just come. We all do react differently. Number 5, what reactions are you having that you might be afraid to let others know about because you think these reactions are not normal? The violent reaction to take revenge and go stab somebody that attacked my family member or friend, whatever. Personal reactions continued on card number 7. What other reactions are you having that are new to you, persistent, seem strange, or are worrisome to you? Are there any traumatic dreams, flashbacks, intrusive thoughts? And I know people that are in disasters or wartime things often have these kind of reactions, or if they were attacked, a violent event. What worries you now that did not worry you before? So this is a little bit different than thinking about. This is worries. Worries are emotional and not necessarily rational. Is there anything you think might have been done that wasn't done, or was done that didn't need to be done? How has this incident changed your view of your life right now? How you look at yourself, others around you, your work environment? So some people might not feel comfortable going back to work after there was a robbery, for example. I'm disappointed in myself. I used to be hopeful and cheerful, and now I look at things with all doom and gloom. Okay, the summary stage. Any thoughts, questions? Okay,
I do.
sure. Go ahead, Etta.
Yeah, I'm remembering back because I think I mentioned I worked for the Department of Corrections, and we would have what they call mobilizations, which are made up or simulated emergencies. It could be emergency medical incidents that happen. It could be fights, or it could be a combination of things. And just thinking back, as a shift commander who has to handle all those things, sometimes one, incident, then another, and staff. Now even though we had a form of debriefing that we had to go through for serious emergencies, and those things, even, let's say, I wasn't in this one, but there was a chemical spill, and where they had to get prisoners, staff, and then in the midst of that, prisoners and staff were falling out, and people had to handle those things. So at that time, they hadn't brought in the debriefing after emergencies, but now I can see where that was needed, because especially your body reactions and things that are described here now. Now it sort of makes sense what you were feeling then, because even though the department is not a police agency, they have some sections or parts of it that kind of mimics it. It makes you it make you feel like you're not strong if you feel you felt those things. So now I see that it was okay for you to experience those things, release those things off your body, and that you weren't going crazy or anything, because at that time nobody asked you, hey, how are you sleeping? How are you okay with what happened? Do you want to talk about it? Because it wasn't looked at as being part of the training early on when I first started. But later on, after I believe the 90s and early 2000s, they started to bring those things in. But I can see now how this type of debriefing and just, helps anyone in any kind of incident like that. I just wanted to.
Right, so that's just confirming. And so what you're saying then is, even now, what you know now, if you went back and went through those similar events, it would have been helpful.
Yes.
And even now God can bring healing through this. Not too long ago, we were going through a certificate class, and one of the students was having some very strong reactions as we were just going. We were doing an incident. We were debriefing after a mock incident, and she was having a lot of feelings and emotions, and it brought some things out, and it helped. She was feeling some of the same things that she felt when she went through a difficult crisis, right? So, as I mentioned, I was feeling some of the different physical and things as I was even just typing this up, thinking about some things that we've gone through and been going through. Okay. All right, the summary stage. We're now at the final stage. The debriefer can refer to the notes. So they might talk about some of the facts that came up. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jane, who is probably taking the notes. Let me first summarize the main issues that came up today. So there may have been a family incident, so they might be talking about some discord in the family, some anger that led to a physical altercation and perhaps an injury or death, right? So they talk about, well, what happened here? The camps that this person, they were dividing into this person's fault or that person's fault. They would talk about some of the issues that came up. Normalize the reactions they identified during the session. You could say something like, the reactions you described are not at all unusual. Feeling responsible, having dreams, being easily started, wanting it to be all over. Be sure to adjust shame as a common reaction. Okay, these are still the note cards. Prepare them for ongoing reactions by using, we have different handouts that I'm going to email out in a PDF. Do not be surprised if weeks, even months from now, you experience. So this goes along with preparing people in grief, right? The different, and some of the physical and emotional reactions and cycles could even be the same. So you're telling them what could happen. Use the additional handout to encourage them to take very good care of themselves physically, right? So we know that when we are not physically getting enough sleep or nutrition, that we are more vulnerable and susceptible even to illness under times of stress, right? Our immune system doesn't react because we're focusing on other things. Discuss the fact that current reactions may continue or new reactions may yet emerge. This is normal during the first 4 weeks or so. Encourage them to call for assistance if the reactions go beyond 4 to 8 weeks, or so causing them to function poorly. Important exceptions. Reactions may extend beyond the 4-week acute stress period when a person is involved in disasters or other external events where physical reminders cannot be avoided. The same may occur when the details of an incident are kept alive in the media for an extended period of time. Such events often necessitate follow-up debriefing sessions and extend recovery time. I'm not sure if it was last year or 2 years ago, we did a class about a series of classes covering actual cases that H. Norman Wright dealt with. And there was one incident of a person where a family member killed another family member. And this was the father of one of the family members. And there was a trial that, trials and things extend for years. And so it extended the amount of time of suffering and kept this alive for several years, right? First of all, the feeling that the person was dead, the other person was facing imprisonment, and, and your feelings about the person that's dying and your loved one that is did it. And so, it's kind of like, oh, these extend the time of suffering and keep this alive and the stress. So we know our bodies are not meant to handle that heightened state for an extended period of time. So that might, in such a case, there might need to be more debriefing done to keep going over it again, to help them keep processing it as they're going through the different things. Ask, do you have any final questions? Also ask, what at this point in time might help you get through the next several days? So this is usually trying to be done shortly after a critical incident. And so the first few days might be more stressful and difficult, and there might be experiencing stronger reactions. Note, if such suggestions are forthcoming or problems related to management arise, ask if you might have a minute before they leave to talk with the administrator. Have the administrator sit down with them briefly to decide what things can be done immediately and what will take more time to implement. Do this following your closure. So we have the summary stage where we talk about the main points that came up, and sometimes as if there was a robbery or some type of an incident in a company, some kind of something with a mechanical that was, blew up or something, they're going to do a processing that there may need to be a supervisor talk to about the suggestions that the participants feel would have helped them or would help in the future. So then we have the closing stage. Any thoughts, comments? I know. Closure. Thank you very much. I know this has been difficult. I know it can be difficult to revisit such a traumatic incident, but I think you'll find this will be helpful to you. You have our phone numbers. Please call anytime. If you know that you will be returning in 4 weeks for a follow-up session, inform the group at this time. So at the end of your session, mingle for a few minutes after to answer personal questions, or to discreetly recommend to a participant that additional assistance might be helpful. You might find when you're dealing with someone, talking with someone, helping them to decompress, that there's a need for some follow-up, some medical help, and you can talk to the people at the time. Discreetly, you're not going to say publicly, I think you need counseling. Remember, do not get into your car and drive away immediately. Wait for at least 15 minutes before leaving. Talk with the other debriefers. Take a short walk. Take some deep breaths before starting back home. In a recent, in the death notification video next week, we're going to see that the two, I think they're police officers in a car, they are talking to each other about what happened when they went to a home, and talking about, well, this went well, this did not go well, but it was kind of a help for them, because it's a heightened emotional situation. And so also when we're helping somebody walk through a crisis situation, it's not like it doesn't affect us too. And we find that often ministers and medical professionals, psychological professionals, they often have very high suicide rates and physical issues because of the situations that they carry. And we're not made to carry that. We're made to be yoked with Jesus. So sometimes you might find, well, you're having trouble sleeping because the situations are going through your mind and different other reactions. So we need to also kind of debrief and kind of calm down before we go on. Any thoughts before we continue? So those are the cards that I will be emailing to those of you that do not have it. Okay, I know there's some people that have them.
Yes. Again, it's important that we debrief ourselves and ensure that we are getting what we need as far as you said, taking a deep breath, walking, talking to others. Because if we're in positions like that and we have all that weight on us, you know, just like I said, as a shift commander, a captain, all that weight is upon that person. Okay. And then at that time, there was no debriefing. So now I understand maybe when I didn't go home and I couldn't sleep for a couple hours. It makes sense now, you know, and, you know, other things that are going on, you know, you'll be tired and, you know, and things like that. So this is good information to explain what was going on with me and even others, because I know there was other colleagues that drank, you know, behavior that was out of sight of what we should, you know, been doing as professionals or as paramilitary or police officers or so forth. So now this debriefing or this information is important for all of us, even in my personal family, where I had a few weeks ago, there was a situation where I had to go over and talk to one of my young grandsons. And then I thought about, you know, this information, and I put some of that information, you know, did some of the things calmly, went in, talked, gathered the information. And I was surprised that the surprise that for me was once when I went in, I didn't notice that my body was shaking. And I kind of looked at it and I said, oh, I didn't notice that my body was kind of shaking. So I was able to go home, take deep breaths, walk, do some things, went over my mind what was going on, and sort of that calmed myself down. But this information is so vital for all of us, for our personal lives, our lives in ministry, at work, and anything like that.
Yeah. And I think too, I'm thinking back to a session we had with a police chaplain from a local police department, and they were talking about how it takes a certain amount of hours for them to process. And so a lot of times they would do that. They would drink, or you come home and you're still in this heightened state of alert. And so they're not able to function with their family. And then you have to go back for another shift. And I forgot how much period of time the chaplain said that it takes for your body and your whole system to come down. But then they're going right back into another shift, and they haven't debriefed and they haven't processed it. And so it's
that is so right. It is that you go from an emergency or two on your shift, and it may run over to another shift, and then you back for your own shift again with a few hours of sleep, and maybe not a lot of debriefing or a lot of being able to talk about it, get that off of you, and you're back to another shift, and you're expected to function, you know, within your job and be able to do that and handle anything else that come up. So there is a lot of drinking and in those jobs, and with the police, with the corrections officers, with the correctional staff, administrative staff. There's a lot of drinking in that. Now, once you start getting up like my level and above my level, rather, in administrative, and there's less drinking and stuff because you're not with the
Personally involved.
day-to-day. Yes,
Right.
yeah, personally involved. But you're not only involved with the prisoners. You have to make sure that the prison is running correctly. But you have to be able to interact with all staff. That means healthcare staff. That means police officers and people coming in. If there's emergency, you got to be able to know and deal with the police department, the fire department, whatever that is. And when I first started, as I said, there were no debriefing. There was no one that said, "Hey, how are you feeling?" And so later on, they had what they call employee services, where you can call in and just, it's a counselor where you can kind of like debrief, get those things off of your chest, because a lot of staff, there have been people that just quit, just say, you know, I can't do this anymore, or say I need a break and maybe go away and take a break for a while. And then there'll be people that, you know, drink, just take the opposite way of life. You wonder what happened to that person. So this training or this recognition now explains a lot of what went wrong with the department years ago, especially when they did not have this kind of debriefing and employee services and counseling and so forth.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate so much experience that we have among us that we can all draw from and help one another. And it's important. And we can be thankful that we can come to one another and kind of unload and share that burden a little bit. Bridget shares that she had a situation where she had to stop an altercation between two nephews, and she got hit while she was trying to do it, and they were so angry that they didn't even realize that they had hit her, right? So yeah. Okay, anybody else that wants to has something that they want to contribute before we go into this little summary here? Okay. So I'm going to send you, this is from the Barnabas organization again. As you could see while I was scrolling down, they have their whole preliminary, discussion about how to do a debriefing, which you can read on your own time to help you figure out and process how you're going to help people to de-escalate the results of encountering these kind of situations. But this is the summary at the bottom of, it's a 12-page PDF. So I'm going to put things in a couple of emails so that it doesn't overload your I don't know if it can send, if there's too much space to send it all in one anyway. So this is a summary of 7 steps of crisis debriefing from the Barnabas organization. Step 1 is the pre-debriefing. Gather relevant information regarding the critical incidents and the needs of the organization and individuals before beginning the process. Do a self-assessment to determine your effectiveness and set up logistics and time and location. And often we can send out some information about debriefing. We need to get them understanding what they're going to be going through when we actually conduct a debriefing with them. So in the contact, when we're We introduce ourselves, we help the person understand our role and explain the crisis debriefing process, answer any questions they may have, and establish rapport, which I think we forget about because sometimes we just don't click, right? So we want to be able to have the people feel comfortable with us and relate to us, that they can feel comfortable and safe with us. Discover pre-crisis factors. Okay. We get the story. Invite the person or persons to describe what happened just before, during, and after the incident. Ask open-ended questions and help them explore the facts, the thoughts, and the sensory experience related to the event. We're using such questions to prompt them. What happened next? What were you thinking at that time? What did that look like? What did that look like is kind of a good question that we can put into our arsenal of tools. Impact. Invite but do not pressure the person to share the emotional impact of the event. For some people, it is helpful to avoid asking directly about feelings, but rather to ask questions. What was the hardest part of all this for you? What kind of reactions were you experiencing then? The education that we were talking about. Help the person understand that the reactions that they are experiencing are common or typical reactions. You can explain that why they are experiencing some of the reactions. Some people care about, it's helpful to them to understand our physical makeup and help what equipment God has given us to handle these things. We can use handouts, help them anticipate triggers that they might experience in the future. Okay. Current function and coping. Find out how they have coped in the past. Explore or further assess how they are doing now. Help them to create a current coping plan. Okay, so that is a little bit difficult to do in a group setting. You would have to do that. To do it individually in a group setting is difficult, but you can give a general outline of how we can handle these things. Follow up. Ask them if there's anything they would like to talk about or ask before you end. Set up follow-up time if needed, or just informally check on them within a week. So, yeah. Okay. So, I'm getting there here. All right. So we're wrapping up this session here. So we're going to talk about some of the things we've talked about and kind of tie some things in here. Okay. So looking a little bit at trauma, 70% of people have had or a traumatic experience. Of those 75 people of the population, only 25% experience trauma. So that tells us that how our spirit, soul, and body are made up, and the ways we've incorporated into our life to deal with stress and problems makes a difference in how an event affects us. Okay. Everyone is at risk, but the ability to handle life's ordinary stresses and personally develop coping skills help. Trauma leads to isolation, I'm repeating, silence, and feeling hopeless. I'm never going to be able to recover. We want our goals, we want to help them feel safe. We try to provide reasons for the symptoms. We use the term normalize. It's not because they're normal, it's because it's common, right? This isn't how we don't have these situations every single day. Our goals are to reduce the frequency of their symptoms. Okay, if they're having flashbacks or night terrors or The fear of symptoms, I found also with people when they're having panic attacks, because they're afraid of facing certain situations, it paralyzes them. So we have a fear of going through that again. So we want to reduce the frequency of the symptoms, the fear of the symptoms, and the fear of insanity, and rechannel the anger and grief. Okay, on any ideas or thoughts that people would like to share? So we've definitely gone a lot less than the 2 hours going through this and actually not doing a debriefing. I think one of the parts of actually going through a debriefing helps us to see the process and experience it and see the benefits of it as we're walking through it. So for our homework, we've already read the first part of chapter 11, the Crisis and Trauma book. So we read chapters 10 and 11. And okay, so I have this crisis response scripture study that also came from the Barnabas organization that I'm going to provide for you in the this PDF. So this is also helpful for us to equip ourselves and the people spiritually for what to face a crisis. So there's a lot different questions and scriptures that apply. So I'm just putting this up here on the screen so that everybody can just see